Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the trip to Italy Elizabeth and I went on in May of 2024. About a year before the trip, Elizabeth approached me and said, join me. Initially I thought that's crazy because the trip would last a whole month and I'd never been on a trip longer than 2 weeks. But she assured me everything would be fine, to take a deep breath, and then she handed me the trip itinerary, all 19 pages worth. Though intimidating at first glance, it also assured me she had done her homework and that every I had been dotted and every T crossed. Bearing that in mind, and after a few months of deliberation, I told her, sign me up. The initial trip was for Italy and Greece, but I chose to go only on the first leg, Italy. Her pal Jennifer would then close out the trip in Greece. So I dusted off my passport and looked forward to my trip. And that's the backstory. I hope you enjoy this home movie. Our trip started in Austin, Texas, where we would board a British Air flight to London. From there, we would hop on another plane that would take us to the first stop of the trip, Naples, Italy. But aware of the grueling flight ahead of us, we decided some liquid courage would be appropriate. Upon quenching our thirst, we settled into our seats and began our journey. Our first impressions of Italy were shaped by the mighty Mount Vesuvius, which looms over a large swath of Italy, a reminder of Mother Nature's ferocity. But Italians are a resilient bunch, and from the ruins of Pompeii sprung the beautiful cities that awaited us. One resilient Italian, Pasquale, our Airbnb host and driver, met us at the airport. He threw our luggage into his car, and away we went to our lodgings in Naples. Driving in Naples, or most urban areas in Italy, can be quite treacherous and is not recommended, especially for the uninitiated. This is why we let our driver navigate the busy streets for us.
Yes. When I'm young, I crash a lot of cars. But not my car my dad.
Oh.
Yes. My dad. I never told my dad he's going to parking, take the car broken.
Though perhaps not readily apparent, there are rules to driving these narrow streets, and I apply the word streets generously. After all, they were built in the Middle Ages and not designed for modern cars. The first rule is pedestrians have the right of way.
Welcome to Naples!
Yes.
Napoli!
Yay.
After pedestrians, scooters are next in the pecking order, and cars last. Another rule is if cars converge, the car that slows down first has a right of way. Nevertheless, we wisely let Pasquale handle the driving duties, described by Neapolitanes as caos piacevole, or pleasurable chaos.
We have arrived. This is our balcony. Napoli!
After putting down our belongings and settling into our Airbnb, we freshened up and set out to discover what the nightlife was like. After all, it was Saturday night. And we were hungry for pizza. Music of different genres could be heard coming from the restaurants and bars. One street performer in particular captivated onlookers into a sing-along. As we pushed on into the night, we found ourselves at the Piazza di San Domenico Maggiore, home to the Gothic Roman Catholic Church and monastery. In the middle of the square stood the Guglia, or spire. This particular plague column was built to commemorate the end of the plague in the 17th century. But still no pizza, so we pressed on. Many of the walkways resembled bazaars, with merchants on both sides peddling all sorts of goods to visitors and tourists. Adding a little color to the street were these red heart-shaped cutouts, which we weren't quite sure what to make of. Perhaps holdovers from Valentine's Day. Who knows? The good news was we'd finally made it to a cafe for some delicious pizza. The original plan was to go to L'Antique Pizzeria de Michele, made popular by Julia Roberts in the film Eat, Pray, Love. But discouraged by the long wait, we instead walked up the street and found Il Miracolo, where the margherita pizza was truly miraculous. We only planned for a one-night stay in Naples, mainly to get a good night's sleep after 36 hours of continuous travel with only cat naps in between. But on Sunday morning, Pompeii awaited us. The story of Pompeii is well known and has been told for centuries. The city and its inhabitants were buried under about 15 feet of volcanic ash following the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Pompeii is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and today we were among the many tourists, which annually number around 2.5 million. The Forum, or marketplace, was the most public space in Pompeii. Here, citizens practiced religious ceremonies, delivered speeches, conducted business, and took part in many other social activities. One of the most prominent statues in the square is a bronze centaur. This statue is one of 30 works by the late Polish artist Igor Miroray on permanent exhibition. Though not evil, the part horse, part man creatures developed a bad reputation as disorderly and chaotic, especially after too much wine, a habit some people of the 21st century can still relate to. Adjacent to the Forum is the Etruscan Temple of Apollo, built in 120 BC. It was the town's most religious building. Apollo was a god of archery, music, and dance, among other things. The Odeon Theater was a small gathering space seating around 1,500 spectators. This theater was used mainly for council meetings, musical performances, and miming. The much larger Teatro di Pompeo, or Theater of Pompeii, which sat about 5,000 spectators, was built into the hillside in the 2nd century BC. It was a venue for Greek-Roman comedies and tragedies. Behind the theater is an open square bordered by 74 Doric columns where the public could go for a bite before or after performances. In the latter years, this space was used as the barracks of the organization of gladiators. A 3D rendering of the theater illustrates the beauty and scale of this important structure. When you walk the grounds of Pompeii, you can't help notice the scarlet poppies, which become the main inhabitants of these grounds once the tourists leave. They populate every corner of this archaeological site. The poppy is known to symbolize remembrance and hope, resurrection and consolation, a fitting tribute to the poor souls who perished here. Another prominent statue by Miroray is that of Greek craftsman and genius Daedalus. Yes, the same one from the famous story of Daedalus and Icarus. Back then, he was famous for his brilliant creativity. He's credited with designing the labyrinth and the first dance floor. Today, his statue is at the entrance to these ancient ruins. From his precipice, he stares downward, perhaps dismayed by the new wave of tourists disturbing his watch. Walking the streets of Pompeii was a pleasure. but it also felt like a religious experience with a fair amount of gravitas, as the city continues to retain a certain dignity. And while learning about this ancient culture was enlightening, our serene sojourn here had come to an end, since this was just the first leg of our journey today. But we left feeling grateful for this perfect experience. Until it wasn't. It seems our driver Pasquale had gone AWOL and could not be reached, not by us, nor by his wife, mom, dad, brother, who were all frantically ringing his phone. When he finally surfaced, he apologized profusely to us and to everyone in his family, and then we were off on the road to Positano. The drive to Positano would take a little over an hour, even though we were only 23 miles away. But SS 145 is a crowded, meandering road with steep gradients and many tour buses and scooters to dodge. Since we had more than a capable chauffeur, we were able to spend our time contemplating the idyllic surroundings on our coastal joyride. Italy has over 4,700 miles of coastline, and at times it seems as if the 20 or so miles we had traversed were the most picturesque. And speaking of picturesque, Pasquale suggested we pull into one of the many overlooks for a photo op. He chose a spot overlooking the Gulf of Naples. And as a good guide and driver, he knew no drive along the Sorrentine Peninsula is complete without that light, elegant, and refreshing beverage known as a granita. This dessert, which is native to Sicily, comes in many fruity flavors and is made with ice shavings. Pro tip, add some distilled spirits and now it's a tasty cocktail. When our granita pit stop was over, we were back admiring the stunning vistas. It's not an exaggeration to say that the hour it took us to get to Positano flew by. There were just too many beautiful distractions along the Amalfi Coast. And then we had finally arrived. We left Austin Friday evening and now it was Sunday afternoon local time. Positano would be a 5-night stay, which we welcomed after all the running around we'd done up to this point. So we parted ways with our Airbnb host / driver / granita purveyor. Pasquale had just the right mix of temperament and personality to get our Italian adventure off to a great start.